You felt it in your chest first, that hollow, sinking sensation that arrives without warning, stealing your breath and leaving you momentarily suspended between disbelief and devastating clarity. The moment when the mask slips, when the performance finally ends, when the person you defended with your life reveals the cold calculation that was always there, hidden beneath their carefully crafted expressions of care. You've just discovered that while you were building trust, they were building a trap. While you were offering loyalty, they were mapping your vulnerabilities. While you were believing in their words, they were counting the cost of your eventual destruction. This is the silent knife, the betrayal that cuts deepest because it comes from within your inner circle, wielded by someone who knew exactly where to strike. They studied your patterns, memorized your weaknesses, and cataloged your fears not out of love, but out of strategy. You gave them the blueprint to your own downfall, handed over freely in moments of vulnerability that you thought were building connection. Now you understand the terrible mathematics of misplaced trust. Every secret you shared was intelligence gathered. Every moment of emotional openness was reconnaissance. Every display of loyalty was simply data to be used against you when the time was right. The shock isn't just that they betrayed you. It's that they were never the person you thought they were at all. The version of them that you trusted, defended, and believed in was a carefully constructed fiction, designed specifically to exploit your psychological needs and emotional blind spots. They became whoever you needed them to be, mirrored whatever you valued most, and performed whatever role would grant them the deepest access to your inner world. You weren't in a relationship with a person. You were in a relationship with a strategy. But here's what cuts the deepest. You sensed that somewhere, on some level, you knew. There were moments when something felt off, when their responses seemed too perfectly calibrated, when their concern felt rehearsed rather than genuine. Your intuition sent you signals that your conscious mind chose to ignore, because the alternative, accepting that you were being systematically deceived by someone you loved, was too painful to face. So you silenced your inner voice, dismissed your growing unease, and convinced yourself that doubt was disloyalty. You chose the comfortable lie over the uncomfortable truth, and that choice made you complicit in your own betrayal. You're left with questions that tear at the foundation of everything you thought you knew about human connection. How long were they planning this? How many of your conversations were being mentally recorded for future use? How many times did they smile while calculating your destruction? How many moments of seeming intimacy were actually moments of strategic planning? The person you trusted most has become a stranger, and the stranger has become your most dangerous enemy. You've been conditioned from childhood to believe that loyalty is sacred, that trust freely given is a virtue, that good intentions naturally protect you from those who would do you harm. Society celebrates the trusting heart, praises the loyal friend, and elevates the person who sees the best in others, even when evidence suggests otherwise. You've been taught that cynicism is ugly, that suspicion is toxic, and that questioning people's motives makes you the problem. These beautiful lies have been woven into the fabric of your identity until they became indistinguishable from your moral code. But what if this very conditioning is the trap? What if your noble intentions have made you a perfect target for those who understand the game you've been trained not to see? What if your commitment to trust and loyalty has become a weapon in the hands of people who recognize your psychological patterns better than you do? The uncomfortable truth is that your virtue has become your vulnerability, your strength has become your weakness, and your moral compass has become a tool for your own manipulation. Those who would exploit you understand something you've been taught to ignore, that relationships exist on multiple levels simultaneously. While you operate primarily from emotion and authentic connection, they operate from strategy and calculated advantage. While you give trust as a gift, they treat trust as a resource to be harvested. While you see relationships as opportunities for mutual growth and support, they see relationships as systems to be optimized for maximum extraction of value. You've been playing checkers while they've been playing chess, following rules they never intended to honor. Your goodness, your loyalty, your willingness to see the best in people. These qualities that make you human also make you predictable. And predictability, in the hands of someone who thinks strategically, becomes a form of control. They know that if they present themselves as wounded, you'll rush to heal. If they position themselves as misunderstood, you'll defend them. If they claim to be reformed, you'll believe in their transformation. Your responses become as automatic as pressing keys on a piano, and they've learned to play your psychological instrument with masterful precision. The most insidious part is how they've convinced you that your suspicions are character flaws. Every time your intuition sent warning signals, they were there to explain away your concerns, to make you feel guilty for doubting, to position your growing awareness as evidence of your own moral failing. They turned your survival instincts against you, training you to view your own protective mechanisms as problems to be overcome rather than wisdom to be heeded. 5 centuries ago, Niccolò Machiavelli wrote about the brutal mechanics of human nature that still govern every interaction today. He understood that those who fail to recognize deception are doomed to become its victims, not because they lack intelligence, but because they lack the willingness to accept that others might operate from fundamentally different moral frameworks. Machiavelli wasn't celebrating manipulation, he was documenting it, providing a manual for survival in a world where good intentions alone offer no protection against strategic malice. You've been taught to judge Machiavelli harshly, to see his observations as cynical or immoral. But what if he was simply honest about realities that others prefer to deny? What if his insights weren't prescriptions for how to behave, but descriptions of how power actually operates? What if understanding these dynamics isn't about becoming manipulative yourself, but about protecting yourself from those who already are? The prince he wrote about isn't necessarily you, it might be the person sitting across from you, wearing the mask of friendship while calculating your defeat. Machiavelli observed that people judge by appearances rather than by results, that they're more easily deceived by what they want to see than by what actually exists. He noted that those who would control others understand the gap between public persona and private intention, between performed virtue and actual character. Most importantly, he recognized that in relationships where one person operates from authentic emotional connection and another operates from strategic advantage, the strategic thinker will almost always prevail, not because they're superior, but because they're playing an entirely different game. This doesn't mean you need to become Machiavellian in your approach to relationships. It means you need to recognize when others are being Machiavellian in their approach to you. Emotional intelligence without tactical awareness leaves you defenseless against calculated betrayal. Understanding psychology without understanding strategy makes you an expert on your own exploitation. You can maintain your humanity while developing the ability to see clearly, to protect yourself without becoming what you despise. The transformation begins with accepting that some people view relationships as opportunities for advantage rather than connection. This isn't cynicism, it's realism. This isn't paranoia, it's pattern recognition. This isn't closing your heart, it's opening your eyes. Machiavelli's mirror reflects not what you should become, but what others might already be. The question isn't whether you're willing to manipulate, but whether you're willing to recognize manipulation when it's being used against you. You notice they speak constantly of their integrity, their loyalty, their unshakable moral code. But something feels rehearsed about their declarations, too polished, too convenient, too perfectly timed to address exactly the doubts you've been harboring. When challenged, they don't just defend their actions, they perform their virtue, delivering speeches about their character that feel more like auditions than authentic responses. Their morality always comes with an audience. Their integrity always needs witnesses. Their goodness always requires recognition and praise. Genuine virtue operates in silence. Real integrity doesn't need to announce itself because it's demonstrated through consistent action over time. Authentic loyalty doesn't require constant verbal reinforcement because it's proven through behavior during moments when no one is watching. But performed virtue screams for recognition, demanding that you acknowledge not just their actions, but their superior character, their exceptional morality, their rare commitment to doing what's right. Watch how they position themselves in every story they tell. They're always the hero, always the victim, always the person who chose the difficult path because of their unwavering principles. Their narratives are too clean, their moral victories too complete, their sacrifices too perfectly noble. Real people have complicated stories with ambiguous outcomes and questionable decisions. But they've edited their personal history to remove all traces of ordinary human failing, creating a mythology of themselves that serves their strategic needs rather than reflecting their actual experience. Pay attention to how they respond when their virtue is questioned or their version of events is challenged. Do they engage with the substance of your concerns, or do they pivot immediately to defending their character? Do they address the specific behavior that troubled you, or do they deliver a speech about their general goodness? Do they acknowledge any possibility of error, or do they position your doubt as evidence of your own moral failing? Those who perform virtue can't tolerate examination because examination reveals the performance. Notice the timing of their moral declarations. They tend to proclaim their integrity loudest when their actions suggest otherwise, to emphasize their loyalty most strongly when they're preparing to betray, to perform their concern most dramatically when they're about to cause harm. Their virtue becomes a preemptive defense against accusations they know are coming, a shield constructed from words designed to make you question your own perceptions rather than their questionable behavior. The performance of virtue also serves another strategic function. It creates a false binary where questioning them means questioning goodness itself. They position themselves as the embodiment of whatever values you hold most dear, making criticism of their actions feel like criticism of those values. If they claim to represent loyalty, then doubting them becomes disloyalty. If they claim to represent honesty, then questioning them becomes cynicism. If they claim to represent love, then examining their behavior becomes coldness. But authentic virtue doesn't need this kind of protection. Real integrity can withstand scrutiny because it's built on actual consistency rather than carefully managed appearances. Genuine goodness doesn't feel threatened by honest examination because it has nothing to hide. The person of actual character welcomes questions because they understand that trust, earned through transparency, is stronger than trust demanded through performance. When someone truly lives by their principles, you don't need to be told about it constantly. You see it demonstrated through their choices when those choices are difficult, through their behavior when they think no one is watching, through their consistency across different contexts and relationships. They don't need to convince you of their virtue because their virtue convinces you of itself. That they ask probing questions disguised as concern, their curiosity about your private struggles feeling somehow different from genuine care. There's a quality to their attention that feels more like data collection than emotional connection, a precision to their memory that seems tactical rather than affectionate. They remember details about your vulnerabilities with unsettling accuracy, bringing up your fears and insecurities at moments that feel strategically chosen rather than spontaneously caring. Watch how they gather information. Their questions often feel like interviews disguised as conversations, systematically exploring your psychological terrain under the pretense of getting to know you better. They want to understand not just what hurts you, but exactly how it hurts you, not just what you fear, but precisely how that fear operates, not just what you need, but specifically how those needs can be leveraged. They position themselves as your confidant while mentally cataloging everything you reveal. Notice how they respond to the information you share. Do they offer genuine support and helpful perspective, Or do they simply absorb what you've told them and move on to the next area of inquiry? Do they share their own vulnerabilities in return, creating mutual understanding? Or do they remain mysteriously opaque while encouraging you to become increasingly transparent? The information collector gives just enough of themselves to keep. You talking, but never enough to create true reciprocity. Pay attention to what they do with the knowledge they gain. Does intimate information you shared in confidence somehow find its way into later conversations, used to prove points or support arguments in ways that feel uncomfortable? Do they reference your weaknesses at moments when you're feeling strong, your fears when you're feeling brave, your needs when you're trying to be independent? The tactical use of personal information reveals the true purpose behind their initial curiosity. They often test your boundaries by sharing increasingly personal details about others, watching to see if you'll reciprocate with equally sensitive information about yourself or people in your life. They present these exchanges as evidence of growing intimacy, but they're actually assessments of your willingness to break confidences and your capacity for discretion. They're determining not just what secrets you'll share, but what secrets you can be trusted to keep, and more importantly, what information you might use against them if the relationship sours. The information collector understands that knowledge is power, that psychological insight creates strategic advantage, that understanding someone's internal landscape provides multiple avenues for influence and control. They don't gather this intelligence because they care about your emotional well-being. They gather it because emotional information is the most powerful form of leverage in any relationship. Your pain points become pressure points, your needs become dependencies, your fears become control mechanisms. But genuine care operates differently. Someone who truly loves you wants to understand your struggles so they can support you through them, not so they can use them against you later. They ask questions because they want to help, not because they want to gain advantage. They remember your vulnerabilities because they want to protect them, not because they want to exploit them. The difference is often subtle, but it's crucial, and your intuition usually knows the difference, even when your conscious mind wants to give them the benefit of the doubt. Their support arrives with invisible strings attached, their loyalty fluctuating based on circumstances, convenience, and what you can provide in return. When you observe their behavior carefully over time, you notice that their allegiance shifts with opportunity. Their availability correlates with your usefulness, and their commitment depends entirely on what's in it for them. They've mastered the art of making transactional relationships feel like deep, emotional connections. Watch how their energy changes when you need support versus when you can offer advantage. When you're struggling, their responses feel perfunctory, distracted, or subtly impatient. But when you have something they want, access, information, resources, connections, suddenly you have their full attention, their enthusiastic engagement, their complete availability. They become whoever you need them to be, but only for as long as you have something they need you to give. Notice the timing of their generosity. Their offers of help tend to come when helping you serves their interests, when your success creates opportunities for them, when your victories can be leveraged for their benefit. But when you need support that offers them no advantage, when helping you might actually cost them something, their availability mysteriously evaporates. They have urgent priorities, unexpected complications, unavoidable commitments that prevent them from being there when you truly need them. Pay attention to how they respond when you can't provide what they're seeking. If you lack the resources they want to access, the connections they hope to leverage, or the influence they want to borrow, their interest in maintaining contact diminishes rapidly. They don't explicitly end the relationship, that would be too obvious, but they gradually reduce their investment, their responsiveness, their emotional availability, until you're left with the hollow shell of what once felt like genuine connection. The conditional alliance also reveals itself in how they manage multiple relationships. You realize that they position themselves strategically within social networks, maintaining connections with various people who serve different functions in their overall strategy. They don't just have friends, they have a portfolio of relationships, each serving specific purposes, each activated when needed and deactivated when not. You're not their friend, you're one component in their strategic ecosystem. They often test the transactional nature of relationships by creating artificial scarcity or manufactured urgency. They present opportunities that require immediate commitment, decisions that can't wait, exclusive access that expires quickly. These pressure tactics reveal their true understanding of the relationship. It's not built on trust and mutual care, but on calculated exchange and strategic positioning, but authentic. Relationships operate from abundance rather than scarcity, from genuine care rather than strategic calculation. Real friends support you not because of what you can provide, but because of who you are. Their loyalty doesn't fluctuate with your circumstances because it's based on actual affection rather than perceived advantage. Their availability doesn't correlate with your usefulness because they value the relationship itself, not just what the relationship can do for them. You begin to see the pattern now, how methodically they've constructed their image, how strategically they've positioned themselves in your life, how carefully they've prepared their eventual exit while professing permanent commitment. This isn't spontaneous betrayal born from momentary weakness or unexpected temptation. This is calculated deception, planned from the beginning, executed with precision and patience. They've built their reputation like an architect builds a structure, every detail considered, every element serving multiple functions, every component designed to support the overall strategic objective. Their public persona isn't an authentic expression of their character, but a carefully crafted tool designed to achieve specific outcomes. They understand that reputation is currency, that perception becomes reality, that controlling how others see you provides enormous power over how others treat you. Watch how they manage information flow about themselves. They control not only what people know, but when they know it, how they learn it, and from whom they hear it. They present curated versions of their history, edited narratives that support their current objectives, selective truths that create desired impressions while concealing inconvenient realities. They don't just they manage truth like a resource to be allocated. Strategically. Notice how they position themselves in relation to conflict and controversy. They're never directly involved in drama, but they're always well informed about it. They don't start fights, but they often benefit from the chaos that follows when others fight. They maintain plausible deniability while creating conditions that serve their interests. They understand that the person who appears to be above the conflict often has the most to gain from its outcome. The architecture of their deception includes multiple exit strategies. They never commit so completely that they can't withdraw, never invest so heavily that they can't walk away, never reveal so much that they can't reinvent themselves elsewhere. They maintain parallel relationships, backup plans, alternative narratives, ready to deploy if their current strategy fails. They think several moves ahead while you remain focused on the present moment of false security. They also understand the power of gradual revelation, slowly introducing ideas, perspectives, or expectations that would have been rejected if presented all at once. They normalize their agenda through incremental exposure, making each step feel like a natural progression rather than part of a predetermined plan. By the time you recognize the pattern, you've already traveled much further down their path than you ever intended to go. The most sophisticated aspect of their architecture is how they make you complicit in your own deception. They don't just lie to you, they create conditions where you lie to yourself. They provide just enough truth to make their fiction believable, just enough consistency to make their contradictions seem like misunderstandings, just enough genuine interaction to make their performance feel authentic. You become invested in believing them because accepting the alternative means acknowledging your own poor judgment, The uncomfortable truth emerges like dawn breaking through fog your desire. To trust, to connect, to believe in others' goodness has created massive blind spots in your perception. Your emotional needs have systematically overridden your analytical judgment, and your psychological vulnerabilities have been studied and exploited by someone who understood your internal landscape better than you understood it yourself. Your longing for acceptance made you ignore red flags that would have been obvious in any other context. Your fear of loneliness made you cling to connections that your intuition repeatedly warned you against. Your need for validation made you grateful for attention that was actually assessment, affection that was actually strategy, care that was actually calculation. You wanted so desperately to be understood that you handed over the blueprint to your own manipulation. But this isn't just about being naive or trusting. It's about how your deepest human needs became weapons in someone else's hands. They recognized that your desire for genuine connection was so strong that you would accept its counterfeit. They understood that your fear of being alone was so powerful that you would choose bad company over no company. They realized that your need to feel special was so compelling that you would believe their fiction rather than face their reality. The psychological blind spots weren't accidental. They were created deliberately through a process of conditioning that happened so gradually you didn't notice it occurring. They slowly trained you to dismiss your intuitive warnings, to explain away their inconsistencies, to make excuses for their behavior that you would never make for anyone else. They taught you to value their version of events over your own direct experience, their explanations over your own observations. Your emotional investment became a form of cognitive imprisonment. The more you cared, the more you had to lose by seeing clearly. The deeper your attachment, the higher the cost of admitting you'd been deceived. The stronger your feelings, the more motivated you became to preserve the illusion rather than face the truth. They didn't just exploit your emotions. They turned your emotions into a defense system protecting their deception. You also became addicted to their validation, dependent on their approval, invested in their version of who you were supposed to be. They didn't just manipulate your feelings about them. They manipulated your feelings about yourself. Your self-worth became entangled with their opinion of you. Your identity became dependent on their acceptance. Your reality became filtered through their perspective. They made themselves essential to your emotional stability, then used that dependency to control your behavior. The hardest part to accept is how long you ignored your own inner voice. How many times you chose their comfortable lies over your uncomfortable truths. How consistently you betrayed your own instincts in service of preserving a connection that was never what it appeared to be. Your emotional blindness wasn't just a weakness, it was a choice you made repeatedly. Every time you decided that maintaining the illusion was easier than facing the reality, you discover that emotional distance is not coldness, it's clarity. By creating space between your feelings and your decisions, you gain the ability to observe behavior objectively, to see patterns without being blinded by hope, to evaluate relationships based on evidence rather than wishful thinking. Strategic detachment doesn't mean becoming heartless. It means protecting your heart while keeping your mind clear. This detachment isn't about shutting down your capacity for connection or becoming cynical about human nature. It's about developing the ability to love intelligently rather than desperately, to trust gradually rather than immediately, to invest emotionally in people who have proven themselves worthy of that investment through consistent behavior over time. You learn to maintain your humanity while protecting your strategic interests. The power of strategic detachment lies in its ability to break the cycle of emotional reactivity that makes you predictable and therefore controllable. When you're emotionally detached, you don't immediately rush to heal people who claim to be wounded, defend people who position themselves as misunderstood, or save people who present themselves as victims. You observe first, verify through behavior, and respond based on evidence rather than emotional triggers. Strategic detachment also means recognizing that other people's emotions, their tears, their anger, their apparent vulnerability might be performances designed to influence your behavior rather than authentic expressions of their internal state. You learn to distinguish between genuine emotional communication and emotional manipulation, between someone sharing their feelings and someone weaponizing their feelings to control your response. This doesn't make you cold or uncaring. It makes you discerning. You still respond to authentic human need with compassion and support. But you no longer allow manufactured crises to derail your judgment, manipulative displays of emotion to override your boundaries, or strategic vulnerability to compromise your clear thinking. You develop the ability to care without being controlled, to empathize without being exploited. The practice of strategic detachment requires you to slow down your natural impulse to respond immediately to emotional stimuli. Instead of reacting automatically to someone's distress, their declarations of love, their expressions of need, you create space to observe, to consider, to evaluate whether their emotional communication aligns with their actual behavior over time. You learn to trust patterns more than moments, consistency more than intensity. You also learn to detach from outcomes in relationships, to engage authentically without being invested in controlling how others respond to your authenticity. This, paradoxically, makes you more attractive to people of genuine character, while making you less vulnerable to those who seek to exploit emotional dependency. When you're not desperate for any particular response, you can afford to be honest. When you're not attached to being liked, you can afford to set boundaries. Strategic detachment ultimately becomes a form of self-respect, a way of honoring your own worth by refusing to accept treatment that doesn't reflect that worth. You maintain your capacity for deep connection while developing immunity to shallow manipulation, your ability to love while protecting yourself from those who would abuse that love. You learn that your words, your plans, your vulnerabilities are currencies that should be spent carefully rather than scattered freely. Those who would betray you cannot use information they don't possess, cannot exploit weaknesses they haven't identified, cannot manipulate needs they don't understand. Strategic silence becomes a form of power that protects you from manipulation while maintaining your ability to connect authentically with those who prove themselves worthy of trust. This isn't about becoming secretive or dishonest. It's about becoming selective. You learn to distinguish between privacy and secrecy, between discretion and deception, between strategic communication and manipulative withholding. You share appropriately based on the level of trust that has been earned through consistent behavior over time, rather than sharing immediately based on emotional intensity or stated good intentions. Strategic silence means observing more than you reveal, listening more than you speak, understanding more than you expose. You become a student of human behavior rather than an open book waiting to be read. You gather information about others' character while carefully managing information about your own vulnerabilities, creating asymmetric knowledge that protects you from those who would use your openness against you. You also learn to control the narrative about yourself, to share your story selectively rather than completely, to present yourself accurately without providing a complete psychological profile that could be used for strategic advantage. You remain authentic while maintaining mystery, genuine while preserving privacy, connected while protecting your inner world from those who haven't earned access to it. The power of strategic silence extends beyond protecting information. It includes controlling your emotional expressions, your reactions to provocation, your responses to manipulation attempts. When you don't immediately react to every stimulus, when you don't reveal your emotional state automatically, when you don't provide the responses that others are fishing for, you maintain psychological sovereignty that makes you much more difficult to control. Silence also becomes a tool for evaluation. When you stop filling uncomfortable silences with nervous chatter, stop explaining yourself constantly, Stop volunteering information to smooth over tension. You create space for others to reveal themselves. People become uncomfortable with silence and often fill it with truth they wouldn't otherwise share, with admissions they wouldn't normally make, with behaviors they would usually hide. You learn that not every thought needs to be spoken, not every feeling needs to be shared, not every question needs to be answered. Your internal experience becomes your private domain, accessible only to those who have demonstrated through sustained behavior that they will honor and protect what you entrust to them. This isn't emotional withholding, it's emotional wisdom. Strategic silence ultimately becomes sovereignty over your own narrative, your own experience, your own psychological territory. You decide what to share, when to share it, and with whom. To share it based on strategic consideration rather than emotional impulse. This makes you simultaneously more mysterious and more trustworthy, more private and more authentic. You emerge from this experience fundamentally transformed, no longer naive about human nature, yet not cynical about human potential. You've developed the ability to see clearly without losing your capacity for genuine warmth, to protect yourself strategically without becoming what you once despised. You understand now that trust is not a gift to be given freely, but a privilege to be earned gradually through consistent demonstration of character over time. You've learned to distinguish between paranoia and prudence, between healthy skepticism and destructive cynicism, between protective boundaries and emotional walls. You can extend trust in measured doses rather than wholesale quantities, building connections that are both genuine and sustainable, both warm and wise. You no longer confuse intensity with intimacy, performance with authenticity, words with actions. Your transformation has taught you that strength isn't about trusting everyone or trusting no one, it's about trusting appropriately. You've developed the discernment to recognize character through behavior rather than reputation, to evaluate relationships through patterns rather than promises, to build connections based on demonstrated compatibility rather than declared intentions. You love more wisely because you understand more clearly. You also understand that your capacity for genuine connection has actually increased, not decreased, through this process. By learning to protect yourself from those who would exploit your goodness, you've preserved your ability to share that goodness with those who deserve it. By developing immunity to manipulation, you've maintained your capacity for authentic intimacy. By learning to see clearly, you've enhanced rather than diminished your ability to love deeply. The new you operates from a foundation of self-respect that makes healthy relationships possible and toxic relationships impossible. You no longer accept treatment that doesn't reflect your worth, tolerate behavior that violates your boundaries, or invest emotionally in people who haven't proven themselves worthy of that investment. This isn't selfishness, it's self-preservation that enables sustainable generosity. You've also learned that transformation doesn't happen once but continuously. Staying aware requires ongoing vigilance. Maintaining boundaries requires consistent reinforcement. Protecting yourself requires eternal attention to the subtle ways that manipulation can evolve and adapt. But this vigilance has become second nature, an automatic background process that operates without consuming your conscious energy or compromising your ability to remain open to authentic connection. You now possess something most people lack, the ability to love strategically and trust intelligently. You've learned to navigate relationships with both wisdom and warmth, extending genuine care while maintaining protective awareness. You understand the difference between healthy caution and destructive paranoia, between strategic thinking and manipulative behavior, between self-protection and selfishness. Your mind has become sovereign territory, no longer subject to invasion by those who would colonize your thoughts with their agendas, populate your emotions with their needs, or redirect your energy toward their objectives. You think your own thoughts, feel your own feelings, pursue your own goals while remaining genuinely available for authentic connection with others who operate from similar integrity. You've developed the rare wisdom to love without losing yourself, to trust without abandoning discernment, to connect without compromising your autonomy. You extend care to others while maintaining care for yourself, offer support to those who deserve it, while refusing to enable those who would abuse it. Your relationships have become collaborations between equals rather than transactions between predator and prey. The sovereign mind understands that true intimacy requires two whole people choosing to share themselves authentically, not one person allowing themselves to be consumed by another's strategic agenda. Real love enhances both parties. Authentic friendship strengthens all participants. Genuine connection creates mutual benefit rather than one-sided extraction. You now know the difference, and that knowledge has set you free. You trust appropriately, because you understand that trust is not a moral imperative, but a strategic choice. Not evidence of your goodness, but recognition of someone else's earned trustworthiness. You've learned of having the wisdom to know the difference between those who deserve your trust and those who would abuse. It is perhaps the most valuable skill you can develop in navigating human relationships. This is your sovereignty, the power to choose wisely, love intelligently, and protect what matters most while remaining genuinely open to all that life has to offer.